Welcome to the Body-First Healing Podcast. I'm Britt Piper, survivor turned somatic experiencing practitioner and author. If you feel stuck in old patterns, overwhelmed by your emotions, or disconnected from yourself, you're in the right place. Each week, I'll share practical somatic tools, personal stories, and conversations to support you in building a more regulated and embodied life. Because you can't talk your way through healing, you have to feel your way through. Together, we'll explore what it means to come back to yourself and create a life that feels safe enough to fully live in. I am so glad that you're here. Hello. Welcome back to the Body-First Healing Podcast. I am Britt Piper, somatic experiencing practitioner, author, and your host here. This week is going to be a bit of a blend. We are getting into a Q&A episode this week, and we'll be covering two different kinds of topics. So first of all, I have somatic practitioner specific questions for those of you who are really interested in exploring the path to becoming a somatic practitioner. And then we have just some other general audience questions. And I do just want to give you a bit of a heads up here that I have a big announcement coming today on the podcast. So please stay tuned. You don't want to miss this. Before we dive into today's questions, I want to read this beautiful review from one of you incredible listeners. This is from Sharon, and it is titled Incredibly Helpful. I've been following Britt on social media since starting cognitive behavioral therapy in 2022. My plethora of physical symptoms and physical pain turned out to be psychosomatic, along with 18 months of weekly and sometimes twice weekly one-on-one with my incredible LPC. Learning from Britt about my nervous system helped me to put into perspective some of the why my body was reacting the way it was to old traumas and CPTSD. Britt's work and the gentleness that she brings into her delivery is like a bit of salve on ripped open wounds. Now, this podcast just helps bring me further into my healing journey. It has reminded me of tools I learned in therapy and forgotten to put into practice. Thank you for what you do, Britt. Thank you, Sharon. You are making a difference in this world. God bless you for your bravery and in your continued journey through healing in this life. I have tears in my eyes. This is so incredible. I just feel so very touched and so grateful for these words of encouragement. I love how this podcast has been landing with you guys. This really has been just such an exciting project that I've been diving into. And to hear that it is supporting you guys in such impactful ways just means truly the world to me. So thank you so much, Sharon, for this. And let's stay connected. I love to hear that you're on this incredible path. Okay, let's dive into our somatic practitioner questions for this week, you guys. This is for those of you who are interested in becoming a somatic practitioner and who are maybe curious about what that path looks like. First question, at what point in one's journey is it safe to say they are stable enough to become a practitioner? So I first just want to state that I absolutely love this question. And I feel like it's such a foundational place for us to start because prioritizing your own nervous system is the most important work that you can do as a somatic practitioner. When I tell people that I work part-time, only a few days a week, what I'm really referencing is the time that I spend with my clients and with my Body-First Healing community. However, when you consider the time that I put into keeping my own system regulated and resilient for my clients, that is a full-time job. So why is it important that you have a regulated nervous system when doing this work? Well, in the world of somatics, we work with the language of our body. And that language can look like sensation, posture, impulse, facial expression, vocal tone. And these are all the ways that we are communicating and supporting and co-regulating with our clients during a session. When you're working with someone who's stuck in chronic dysregulation or survival mode, they often are anchoring on to your more regulated and more resilient nervous system for support. In other words, your capacity within your system to be with activation, which are things that don't feel too comfortable, like anger and grief and sadness and anxiety. Your ability to be with that is going to mirror your client's ability. The more settled you are in your system, the more capacity you have to move in and out of activation, the safer your client's nervous system is going to feel to do the same. So now that we have that kind of as context here, at what point in one's journey is it safe to say they're stable enough to become a practitioner? I would say there's a couple of things that are really important to consider here. So number one, have you been able to meet yourself in your own discomfort? Do you have the capacity to ride the waves of stress and activation and triggers when they come up in your own body? Have you done the trauma resolution work? Have you been able to witness yourself in moments of shame, in moments of frustration, in moments of sadness and grief, in moments of fear? Are you able to effectively, compassionately move through those experiences in the body without getting stuck? Now, I just want to note here, I'm not saying that you should never be triggered, right? Because again, we have this awareness in the somatic world that a dysregulated nervous system is not one that is calm, cool, and collected all the time. A dysregulated nervous system is one that is stuck in chronic states of survival. And what that means is that in a session with a client, you are going to witness and experience all of the activation that comes up for them within your own system. So that is number one. Have you been able to sit with yourself in discomfort without feeling the need to run away, to shut down, to dissociate? Does your body have the capacity to be with that activation without getting stuck there? And then number two, have you made nervous system regulation work a part of your lifestyle? Have you been changed by this work? Do you have a personal regulation routine that you are committed to keep yourself at a resilient enough state to be able to contain not just your activation, but again, the activation of your clients? If the answer is yes to those two questions, then I would say you are ready to get started, but always remember to titrate into the work. Start in the shallow end and build up your practice and build up the work as it expands with your own nervous system's capacity. Let's get into our next question, and I'm actually going to be combining two questions here. So, can you become a somatic practitioner without any prior coaching experience? Or do you have to have a degree like a master's in social work or a licensed marriage and family therapist title or an LPC, licensed professional counselor title, which are both mental health licenses that allow for talk therapy? So this is something I just want to preface by saying that I dive into deeper in a previous episode on the podcast titled, So You Want to Be a Somatic Practitioner. But for now, let me just give kind of the high level answer here, which is no, you do not have to hold a professional license or degree in order to become a somatic practitioner. And depending on the type of somatic practitioner certification or certificate that you are wanting to earn, most of them you do not have to have prior coaching experience. Now, I will say that in some circles and in some modalities, this is starting to change. But I'll use somatic experiencing, which is the modality that I'm professionally trained in, as an example. Again, you guys, I go deep into this in this previous episode that I mentioned. But in somatic experiencing, currently, you do not have to have any previous degree or license in order to apply to be a part of the 3-year somatic experiencing training program. You do, however, need to have previous experience working with clients. Now, the kind of clients that you work with, of course, can differ, and that can be diverse. The way that they describe it in the application, I believe, currently states a helping profession. I previously talked about in that episode how in my somatic experiencing trainings, half of my cohort were licensed therapists who were adding somatic experiencing to their toolkit or their tool belt or to their existing practice, whereas the other half of the cohort were individuals who were in the helping profession. So whether that was trauma-informed coaching, body workers, breathwork facilitators, teachers, even dentists or medical doctors. As long as you're in a helping profession and currently working with clients so that you can have a bit of a practice ground for what you're learning in your 3-year training, then you are good to go. However, I know of multiple other certification training programs that do not necessarily require that you have existing clients or prior coaching experience. Okay, question number 3. What encouragement would you give to clinical mental health counselors? So an encouragement that I would give, and this is coming from someone who's provided lots of trainings for wellness facilities and people who work in the mental health world when it comes to compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, secondary trauma. And that would be to prioritize your own wellness, your own mental health, your own regulation above anything else. It's an analogy that we hear all the time that when you get on a plane, there's a reason why they say put on your mask before anyone else's, but especially in a helping profession, it is vital that we are prioritizing our own well-being because we are of no use to anyone if we can't even support ourselves. In many ways, you have to kind of consider that you are the lifeline for a lot of the clients and the patients that you work with. And if we're running on fumes and we have nothing to give. Now, prioritizing yourself means that you have to get really clear on what your boundaries are. That means you have to get really clear on, number one, starting to understand what is your capacity and what are your boundaries. Are you working too much, too many hours? Are you working with too many clients? Is your caseload too big? Are you working outside of your scope of practice? Once you started to answer those questions and know what your capacity is, then can you start to set boundaries? Can you start to scale back? Or can you start to commit to your work in a way that feels more aligned for you? And then number 3, can you maintain those boundaries that you set? And finally, when we talk about things like compassion fatigue or vicarious trauma or burnout in the helping profession, it's not always necessarily about giving away too much, as it's also sometimes about not giving ourselves enough, not doing enough of what keeps us regulated and sustained. So that means diving into the things that bring you vitality, the things that bring you life, the things that bring you regulation. Is that nature? Is that time with family? Is it writing? Is it exercising and movement? Is it travel? Is it eating yummy, delicious, healthy food? What are the things that fuel you in life, that give you energy and backup reserves to do the kind of work that's required of a helping professional? Are you depositing into yourself every single day so that there is enough that you can lend out to others? That is a hard lesson that I had to learn and that many of us honestly have to learn. So if you're in that boat, know that you are not alone and that it's also never too late to start putting yourself first. All right, moving into our final question here for somatic practitioners. How would you recommend getting started? I wish I could give a bit of a drum roll here, you guys, because this is where I have a huge, big, wonderful, exciting announcement to make. I am so excited to announce here on the podcast officially that the Body-First Healing Institute's brand new somatic practitioner training is launching in January of 2026. You guys, this is really big. It is honestly something that I have been visualizing, dreaming up, and really just building out over, I feel like in my mind and in my heart the past couple of years. So much of the intention that I've shared with you guys about buying land in Montana and building our space there was to start to create an institute where we can train up an incredible group of somatic practitioners who are bringing this work to the world, who are leading people back to their bodies, back to the innate wisdom and the primal intelligence that we all hold for self-healing. Now, of course, our building that is happening in Montana is not going to be complete for quite some time, but I am excited to announce that we are going to be launching our first online live cohort in January of 2026. A lot more information is going to be provided on our website, and we do have an information session that is coming up on Monday, November 10th at 12 p.m. Central. You can register for that info session to learn all of the details about this incredible training. You can find the registration link for that information session in the show notes. A couple of things I just want to highlight here. Again, you'll learn a lot more in the info session. Is first of all, that this is going to be a robust program. A lot of the certification programs out there are usually only 2 to 3 months long, and they're online self-paced modules, or it's a very long program like the 3-year SE program. This training is really going to meet you in the middle. It is robust. It's 100 hands-on hours where you are in a live group setting with me over 5 months. It's an intimate class size, which means that you get more of that personalized support. There's going to be practice groups where you can implement the work. Live learning every week. Nothing is pre-recorded. Group consultations where we come together and you get to share how this work is changing your clients' lives and lean into me for support and somatic suggestions. This is a training that is going to equip you in an ethical way from the ground up to create an incredible and impactful practice that helps your clients from a body-first approach. Spots are going to be limited. It is first come, first serve. And because I've been hinting at this program for the past 2 years, the wait list is over 250 people long. So again, if you want to learn more, please join me in the information session that we have coming up. All right, my friends, let's transition into audience questions now. First, audience questions. What are ways to train your body to be able to cry? So I first just want to state that there are so many ways that the body expresses or discharges the emotional charge that comes up when we feel emotions. When you feel an emotion, there is a physiological chemical component to that. What first comes into the body are stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. And in order to fully move through that emotion, to metabolize it, to expel it, we have to allow the body to do something called discharging. Discharging is the body's natural way of expressing or releasing those stress hormones. This happens in a number of ways. It can happen through crying, through sweating and perspiration, through shaking, trembling, through movement, through vocalizing, and more. And so what I might encourage is, instead of just solely focusing on crying, can you start to actually track, observe, and get curious of other ways that your body is actually discharging or releasing or moving through emotions without you recognizing it? That would be number one. Number two, a second suggestion that I would have is maybe exploring the elements of SciBAM. SciBAM is a tool that we use a lot in somatic experiencing. It stands for sensation, image, which is like a visualization, behavior, which is the way that the body moves, maybe a posture or an impulse. A stands for affect, which is emotion. And M stands for meaning, which is our thoughts or our cognition. Now, crying kind of falls under two different categories. It could be a sensation, but it's also a behavior or an impulse of the body. And sometimes what we find is that we might not have a lot of access to one channel of SciBAM. Like for some of us, we might be like, you know what? I don't really know what I feel emotionally. My affect channel is pretty weak. However, I can really track the sensations in my body. And for others, it could be vice versa. But the great news about SciBAM is that as we start to explore those channels of SciBAM, what often happens is that as we're with one channel, it starts to open up the experiences of the other channels. So let me give you an example. Maybe you're really good at tracking the sensations in your body. And as you notice a sensation, can you also maybe imagine an image? So the heart racing in your chest brings about this image of an alarm going off. And as you notice that alarm, what happens next? And maybe with the alarm, there's a fluttering and a rising that goes up to your eyes, and now there's tears. So it's these channels of SciBam that we can get curious about and start to become more fluent in that can open up the experiences of the body. All right, let's move into our second question. Any tips on nervous system birth prep? Yes. And you guys, I'm going to drop a couple of links here to some recent posts that I've made about my birth story, both with Noah and with Shia, and how very different they were. I'm also going to drop a resource in the show notes to direct you to a website called Pain-Free Birth. And this is where I did a short course on physiological birth. And it was such a beautiful resource and tool for me to learn about what naturally happens within the body when you are pregnant, when you are in labor, when you are giving birth. And just to give you guys a bit of a summary here. So this idea that we have that birth is always supposed to be this painful, excruciating, we're screaming in a hospital kind of scene, it doesn't always have to be like that. So let me walk you through really quickly the fear, tension, pain cycle, which is something that I learned about in this course, but also something that we know and that we work with quite a bit in the somatic experiencing space. So when we have a fear of something, let's say it's a feeling or a symptom or an emotion, then what happens in the body is that fear creates a stress response, whereby adrenaline and cortisol, our stress hormones, are again released into the body. When this happens, there are neuroanatomical or body-wide changes that also take place. So for instance, it creates tension within the viscera, within the organs, within the joints and the muscles. And when we have more tension in the body, that creates more inflammation, which creates more pain. And the more that we have pain, then the more that we fear the pain. So it's this fear that creates tension, which then creates pain, which then creates more fear, tension, and pain. So again, it's this vicious cycle that we can get in. This is very familiar to the chronic pain or chronic illness cycles that we can get stuck in as well. So that's point number one. Now, lesson number two, really quickly with this, what I learned is that when you have oxytocin, which is the bonding or the love hormone, it releases endorphins, which is the body's natural opioids, or your body's natural pain relievers. So let's think about that for a moment. Stress and fear increase pain. Oxytocin and love increases endorphins, which is the opposite of pain. So when we are preparing the nervous system for birth, what we actually want to focus on is how to create more oxytocin within the physiology, within the nervous system, and within the brain while we are in birth. And what that could look like is focusing on the love that you have for your baby. When you focus on the love, it actually increases the numbing hormones within the body and brings the body into these natural states of expansion rather than constriction. Another thing that was helpful for me to know as well, as I was preparing for birth, was that although a contraction can be painful, if you switch your mindset during those moments to recognizing this is my baby coming closer to me, this is my body doing exactly what it knows how to do, rather than fighting against the contractions, not only do they become less painful, but they become more effective. Some people call this empowered birth. Some people call this ecstatic birth. And it was this course that I went through in learning about how the body and the nervous system works together within our hormones and our physiology to bring baby earthside that I had two drastically different birth experiences. My first birth with Noah, I was completely guided by fear. I was working against my body. Every time a contraction would come, I would brace against it. I would groan. I would scream. And that's why I ended up having a 35-hour natural labor. I did not want to have that same difficult experience when I was having Shia, which is why I took this program and this course. Shia's birth, on the other hand, was a total of 7 hours from beginning to end. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had. Not to say that birthing Noah wasn't also beautiful, but it was incredibly hard. Shia's birth was serene. It was beautiful. It was relaxed. It was calm. I went inside of myself rather than trying to escape my body. I came into a partnership and a communion with my body and with Shaya. I spoke affirmations to her throughout. When I felt a contraction, I would speak to her. I would say things like, "You are coming closer. I can't wait to meet you." I would cry tears of love and gratitude. And with every contraction, she dropped more and more. I actually have pictures, which I posted on Instagram, where as she is coming out, now you guys cannot see this, of course, in the picture. It is edited out, but you can see that I am smiling. I am ecstatic. I am full of oxytocin and so much love. And so again, when we fear the body, it creates more pain. It creates opposition. But when we lean into the body with trust, with love, with connectedness, then the body knows exactly what to do. All right, let's jump into our next audience question here. Where does somatic work end and polyvagal theory begin? So for those of you who are not familiar, polyvagal theory is the upgraded science of the nervous system based on the work of Dr. Stephen Porges that was published in the early 90s. Now, Porges, a researcher, went on to partner with a licensed therapist by the name of Deb Dana, who took Porges's work and all of his incredible science and translated it into a working therapeutic model. Together, they founded and started the Polyvagal Institute, where they train therapists, coaches, practitioners in the language and the framework of the polyvagal theory. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, in addition to my somatic experiencing professional training, I also hold certifications in other modalities, and I did train at the Polyvagal Institute, which is why my program, the Body-First Healing Program, weaves in so many different modalities, such as somatic experiencing, polyvagal theory, somatic attachment therapy, somatic internal family systems, and more. But how do somatic work and polyvagal theory intersect? And I think this is a beautiful question. For those of us who've been through the somatic experiencing training, we are very familiar with how the polyvagal framework and theory gets interwoven into somatic experiencing. They overlap deeply. Now think of it this way. Polyvagal theory gives the map of the nervous system, whereas somatic work is how you navigate the map through the body. Polyvagal theory is the framework, whereas somatic work is the application. In polyvagal theory, we track how our nervous system is shaped by our states, whereas in somatic work, we explore the lived and embodied process of moving through those states. So an example of that might be that polyvagal explains why the body shuts down under threat, whereas somatic work is learning how to slowly bring back life into that shutdown response through maybe gentle regulation, presence, or movement. But together, both of these frameworks and modalities, they bridge science and experience. And wrapping it up, you guys, with our last question for today's episode, how do you overcome fear of chronic pain? So first, I love this question because it gives me a unique opportunity to talk about this concept or this application called inner relationship focusing, which is where we are focusing on the feelings that we have about our feelings, right? So we have a fear of pain, fear of anxiety, frustration about our grief. And it is usually the compounding feeling that we have about our feelings that makes our feelings worse. And it's this overcoupling of fear or maybe frustration or whatever it is that we commonly feel about our symptoms or our feelings that actually creates more stress within our physiology. And when we have more stress, we then have more of the symptoms or the feelings. So it's really this vicious loop that we can get in, which means that it's often less about the symptoms and more how we feel about the symptoms, how we relate to these symptoms. So how can we start to change the perspective or the relationship that we have to some of our natural experiences and symptoms like chronic pain? So the first thing we have to do is we have to acknowledge that that fear is protective. So think about it this way. The nervous system pairs pain with danger. So that fear isn't necessarily irrational. It is the body's attempt to keep us safe. So just that simple mindset shift that the fear is not working against us, it's working for us, can help shift us out of, I need to overcome the fear, to, I need to partner with the fear. I need to move through the fear. Now, another way that we can change the relationship to the fear here is by separating the sensation from the story. So, for instance, somatic work is what's going to help us to feel into the raw sensation. Maybe the fear feels like heat, tightness, pulsing. And as we track just those sensations, that allows for a little bit of space for those sensations and for the fear to actually move through the body and be discharged. However, when we layer that fear with meaning making, that can often take us out of the body where the fear then gets trapped. Now, some ways that we can gently work with the charge of fear is maybe through gentle movement and working in a way that feels titrated, slow, tolerable. This might mean noticing the trembling or the shaking in our hands and allowing our limbs to be with that, which then retrains the nervous system to trust that sensation isn't always a threat. Another way that we can change the relationship here is by reframing that the chronic pain isn't necessarily damage, but stuck activation. Areas of the body that have been holding, bracing, constricting with the intention to keep us safe. And by bringing curiosity instead of criticism or resistance to the chronic pain or the fear, we invite the body to actually resolve it in its own way. And this is going to take me into my last point here on this, which is that we want to prioritize safety first and not necessarily the elimination of symptoms. In somatic experiencing, when we are working with more chronic symptoms or syndromes, we are tracking for three things: frequency, intensity, and duration, while also holding the possibility that symptoms could eliminate over time. So this could look like tracking, does the frequency of my pain flare-ups decrease? Does the intensity go down? Does the duration become shorter? And even small, subtle changes in the right direction is huge progress. So we really want to celebrate and we want to savor that. But ultimately, healing begins when the body feels safe enough to soften those protective responses, not when we're trying to force the pain to go away, which just creates more pressure on the system. Again, we want to stretch the body and the nervous system, not further stress it. All right, everyone, that is going to bring this week's episode here on the Body-First Healing Podcast to a close. I would definitely recommend bookmarking this, sharing it with someone that you know who is getting into this work or someone that you know this could benefit. Thank you so much for subscribing, for liking, for sharing, for reviewing. And I just want to drop that final reminder that if the somatic practitioner path is something that you feel like is calling to you, if it's something that you are curious about, then I would invite you to join me for our upcoming information session on November 10th to learn more about the Body-First Healing Institute's somatic practitioner training. If you are listening to this episode after November 10th, remember there's going to be more information on the bodyfirsthealing.com website, or you can always click on the link in my bio at Heal with Britt, or just look at the show notes below. I hope that you have a beautiful week ahead, and I can't wait to see you again soon here on the Body-First Healing Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning into the Body-First Healing Podcast. If this episode resonated with you, I would be so grateful if you subscribed, left a review, or shared it with someone that you love. I'll see you back here next week, and until then, be gentle with yourself. You're doing the best you can with what you have, and that is more than enough. Just a quick note, this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice. Always consult a qualified provider for personal support.